3. And on the next day our rabbi said to us, "Come, let us arise and go to the city of Naim." And the city of Naim was 3 days' journey from the place where we sojourned. Then Simon and his brother Andrew took us in their ship, and we came to Migdal, but we did not descend from the boat. Likewise, we avoided the city of Tiberias, for our teacher told us that the city is impure and forbidden, meaning thereby the government of Herod, which is in the city. And then we went on by boat until the middle of the day, and we came to a place and landed there, and from there we climbed up the mount of Tabor. And from the summit of Tabor the whole land lieth before thee, as spread on a man's hand, all the level of the sea of Gennesaret, and the green valley of Jezreel, with all the towns and villages, which are in the midst of the fields of grain and the vineyards, the palm trees and the olive trees. And my rabbi saw the tents of Israel, how they were at peace, and he was filled with a great compassion for them. And he lifted up his hands over the whole valley, and he said, "How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, thy tabernacles, O Israel." And he said further, "The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few." And we did not then understand his words, but understood them only later. And it was the will of our rabbi that we should sleep in that place under the sky. And in the morning, after the first morning prayer, we went down from the mount, and we came into the city of En-Dor, which is as a Sabbath walk from the foot of the mount. But the place is unclean, for the Baal Peor still reigneth there, as in the days of the witch, in the time when Saul came to her, and bade her bring up the soul of Samuel the prophet. And from that place it was not far to the city of Naim, and as the name of the city is Naim, or pleasant, so is the city. And thus it is written, "And Issachar saw that the land was pleasant, for the portion of Issachar is like the garden of God before Adam sinned with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The land was as one garden, and the fields bore wheat and oats and fruit trees and flowers. And we saw many people working in the fields, and some of them were reaping with song that which they had sown in tears. And the rabbi blessed the work of the day laborers, and told us many parables and wise similitudes. And when our rabbi saw the fields, how they were sown by the labor of men, and the vine stalks were heavy laden, and the trees blossomed, he lifted up his voice and said, the heavens are for the Lord, and the earth he hath given to the sons of man. And as the heavens declare the glory of God, so the fields declare the labor of man. Verily I say unto you, the men of the army are not so numbered by their commander, as the grass of the field is numbered by the Creator. And for every blade of grass he hath appointed an angel, which shall guard it. By the harvest on the threshing floor shall ye know the work of the husbandman, and by the harvest of good deeds which ye shall cut in the field and gather on God's threshing floor shall ye be judged. There shall be no other measure, and no other weight, and no other numbering, but according to the good deeds which ye have created. For the field is not yours, it is only leased unto you. Therefore let your plough bring forth the more grain, for ye know not when the field will be taken from you. And he told us other parables, as we went through the fields which led to Naim, concerning the plough and the ploughman, and concerning the gardens and the gardeners, whom we met by the wayside. And since the wisest of all men, King Solomon, and likewise since the time of Ben-Sira, the like hath not been heard in the land. And all his words did have but one purpose, to plant in our hearts the fear and love of our Father who is in heaven, that we might be bound to him. Blessed are the ears which heard him. I did engrave his words in my memory, that I might write them down later for the edification of generations to come. And when the sun had fallen to the edge of the sky, and it poured light on the garment of our rabbi, we came to the gate of the city. And there was a great press of people at the gate, for many folk returned then from the fields, and they had with them donkeys laden with grain. Likewise there were caravans of camels laden with cruises of oil and honey and flaxen and woolen clothes and all manner of merchandise. For the city of Naim was rich with possessions, and the rich men were not content with the produce of their land, but imported much merchandise from afar. But for all that, there were some in that press of men and animals who remarked that a rabbi had come to the city with his disciples, for we had surrounded him, that his robe might not be soiled. And they called to one another, "Make a way." And when it was toward darkness, there was one at last, he was a boy leading his donkey, who looked upon us and called out, "See, the man of wonders of the city of Capharnaum is coming unto us." Thereupon we were surrounded by many people, for the good name of my rabbi goeth through the land like the odor of ointment. Then craftsmen left their desks, the merchants left their shops, and they came out on the thresholds of their houses with their lamps, that they might light the way for us, and they called out, "Blessed be ye that come in the name of the Lord." But we hastened to the synagogue of the city, for the evening had fallen, and the time had come for the evening prayer. And in the city of Naim there was a devout man whom they called Simon the Pharisee. And the man had been in Capharnaum, and he had heard the sermon which my rabbi had preached on the hill, and the words had pleased him. Therefore some of the disciples were decided that our rabbi should lodge in the house of Simon the Pharisee, for it was a house of assembly for the learned, and wise men and scribes came to it. And I was preparing to seek out the house of Simon the Pharisee, and to impart to him the coming of our rabbi. And the disciple Levi, who had been a tax-gatherer, had a friend in the city who was likewise a tax-gatherer, and his name was Yochanan, and he was a rich man. And therefore some of the disciples, to wit, Simon the fisher and the brothers Zebedee, were decided that the rabbi should lodge in the house of the tax-gatherer, for he would meet there the common people and those that had been thrust out and were condemned, and who had great need of the help and consolation of our rabbi. But our rabbi said to us, "We will go to the synagogue where all the people assemble, and we will stand there, and whosoever shall ask us to go into his house and lodge under his roof, to him shall we go, for the words of God have been sent to all Jews, and none shall be excluded." And we did according to the words of our rabbi. And when we entered the synagogue, many people came with us, for it was noised abroad that the man who performeth wonders had arrived in Naim. And Simon the Pharisee heard that our rabbi was in Naim, and he put on fine raiment, and he gathered the scribes and Pharisees, and they too put on fine raiment, and they came to the synagogue to receive our rabbi with honor. And Simon the Pharisee lifted up his voice and said to our rabbi, "The sages of our city have come to receive thee honorably, according to the law and custom. And I entreat thee to turn aside to my house, and to sit at my table and eat with us, that I may fulfill the commandment of the welcoming of travelers." And my rabbi answered, "Simon, is it solely to fulfill the commandment of the welcoming of travelers that thou art come to entreat me to thy house? In order that we may sit at one table and eat and converse of the law of God according to the law," answered Simon. For it had come to Simon's ears concerning the strange deeds of our rabbi, which were not after the manner of the learned men, and which had stirred up the chief men of the city of Capharnaum. And therefore Simon was desirous of making inquiry of our rabbi, that he might know how the matter was and what he was to do. And for this reason he had entreated our rabbi to his house, and called the wise men of Naim to him. And our rabbi knew of this thing, but he said naught, and he consented to go to the house of Simon, and to sit with the learned men. And Simon and the learned men conducted him to the house, and a great multitude followed, for it was known that the Rabbi Yeshua ben Joseph was in the city, and that he would sit with the wise men in the house of Simon the Pharisee, and they would make inquiry of his teachings. And when we came to the house, we found at the gate a press of people, and they sought to enter with us to hear the word of God. But the servants of Simon stood before the house, and would not permit them to enter, and drove them hence with staves and whips, and they admitted only the learned men, and such as were called chaver, or colleague. And when my rabbi saw that the servants drove away the people from before the gate, he said to Simon, Why will not thy servants and thy slaves permit the people to enter thy house? And Simon answered, The people of the land are ignorant. The ritual is not strong in their hands, and they know not the laws of purity and impurity. Therefore we are afraid that they may contaminate the house, the vessels, or the bread. And the rabbi looked with compassion on the people, and he said, The people is like an abandoned flock of sheep, which have no shepherd. Notwithstanding, he went into the house of Simon, and took us with him. But Simon Bar-Jonah and the brothers Zebedee stayed without in the midst of the people, and waited for the rabbi. Now Simon the Pharisee was a wealthy man, and his house was large, and filled with many precious vessels of silver and gold and ivory, and tended by many servants. And the servants brought salvers of silver, and jars of water, and sheets, and they washed the hands of Simon and of the learned men that were with him. But they did not wash the hands and feet of our rabbi or of his disciples, for it had already been told them that our rabbi had rejected the commandment of the washing of hands, and that he ate bread with tax collectors, not having washed. And the rabbi beheld all this, and was silent. And I thought in my heart, Who knoweth what will come of this thing? For it could be seen of all that Simon had invited the rabbi into his house to sit with the learned men, in order that he might prove him. And it was thus afterwards that the servants handed our rabbi the bread, and it was wrapped in a cloth, that it might not be defiled. And he took it and said his prayer, and broke the bread, and distributed the pieces among us, his disciples, and we ate, not having washed. And the learned men wondered greatly, for they had indeed meant to prove the rabbi, whether he eateth bread without the washing of hands, and therefore the servants had been commanded by their master not to wash the rabbi's hands. Then one of the learned rose and inquired of our rabbi, The sages of Israel have decreed a great decree by tradition from of old, and now we see that a rabbi who spreadeth his doctrine in Israel eateth bread without the washing of hands. Therefore we ask the rabbi, Teach us that we may know, are the words which thou utterest, and the deeds which thou doest, the tradition which thou hast received from thy rabbis, or from the ancient Hasidians? For thou utterest words, and thou doest deeds, and thou findest not support for them in a text of the Holy Writ, and thou sayest not whence thou hast received these things. And our rabbi answered, That which the Son of Man doeth, and that which the Son of Man saith, he hath received from his Father in heaven. Then the learned men were greatly astounded, and they looked upon each other, and upon the master of the house, upon Simon the Pharisee, for he was the greatest among them in learning and wealth. Then Simon the Pharisee took his long black beard in his hand, and he frowned and said, From the words of the rabbi 3 things may be deduced, whereof 2 are clear to me, but the third is doubtful. Now the first of these things is this, that the rabbi believeth himself to have been sent of God. For it is written in the text, And God said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the house of Israel. Therefore it followeth that if the rabbi speaketh of himself as the Son of Man, he believeth himself to have been sent of God. And the second is this, that every son of Israel hath the right to call God his Father, for it is written, Sons are ye of the Lord your God. But whence can we learn that what the Rabbi saith he hath received from the source of all strength? And my Rabbi answered, The birds on the branches say it. We accept no proof from the birds on the branches, said Simon the Pharisee. The stones in the streets say it. We accept no proof from the stones in the street. The dead, the leprous, the possessed bear witness thereto. The possessed and the sinners, the leprous and the dead are not acceptable as witnesses. If it be so, then let the subject of the dispute appear in person to confirm.